"You're not my blood father," declared at the reading. "The estate goes to Victoria and James." My half-sibling smiled triumphantly. The lawyer cleared his throat. "Mr. Harrison, there's a codicil you weren't aware of. Your late wife held separate assets totaling $23 million. They transfer entirely to her daughter." The conference room smelled like old leather and expensive cologne. I sat alone on one side of the mahogany table while my father occupied the opposite end, flanked by his two biological children. Their lawyer, Mr. Peaton, arranged documents with meticulous care. Outside the windows, rain streaked down in gray sheets that matched my mood perfectly. My mother had been gone for 3 weeks. The funeral still felt surreal, like something that happened to someone else entirely. She'd been only 58 when the aneurysm took her. One moment she was laughing at dinner. The next, she was on the floor. By the time the ambulance arrived, she'd already slipped beyond reach. Dad refused to look at me. His jaw was set in that familiar hard line that meant he'd made up his mind about something. Victoria sat to his right, perfectly composed, in a black Chanel suit. At 41, she'd inherited his sharp features and calculating eyes. James lounged in his chair on the left, scrolling through his phone with practiced indifference. He was 38 and had never worked a real day in his life. I just turned 44, 2 days after Mom's funeral. Nobody remembered. Mr. Peaton cleared his throat. "Shall we begin?" Dad nodded, once curt and dismissive. "Let's get this over with." The lawyer started reading through the standard provisions. The house in Connecticut would go to Dad along with his personal accounts and the vintage car collection. Victoria was getting the vacation property in Cape Cod. James would receive the boat and Dad's stock portfolio. With each bequest, my half-siblings exchanged satisfied glances. My name hadn't been mentioned once. Finally, I couldn't stay silent anymore. What about Mom's things, her jewelry, her accounts? Dad's eyes snapped to mine with genuine contempt. "You have no claim to anything in this family." The words hit like a physical blow. Victoria smirked while James didn't even bother looking up from his phone. "Excuse me." My voice came out steadier than I felt. Dad leaned forward, his hands clasped on the table. "Let me make this absolutely clear. You're not my blood. You never were. Your mother's affair with whatever nobody she was sleeping with 44 years ago produced you. I raised you out of obligation and misplaced loyalty. That obligation ends today." The room seemed to tilt sideways. I'd known Dad was distant, cold, even, but this was something else entirely. Victoria actually laughed, a small musical sound that made my skin crawl. "Oh, don't look so shocked," she said. "We've known for years. Why do you think Dad never treated you the same?" James finally glanced up. "Honestly, we're being generous, letting you attend this meeting at all." My hands were shaking. I pressed them flat against my thighs under the table. "Mom never told me because she was ashamed," Dad said flatly, as she should have been. "The estate goes to Victoria and James, my actual children. You'll receive nothing. I suggest you leave before I have security remove you." Mr. Peaton had been quiet throughout this exchange, but now he shifted uncomfortably. "Mr. Harrison, there's actually something else." Dad waved his hand dismissively. "What?" "Some personal effects." "Fine. Give her whatever trinket she wants." "Not exactly." The lawyer pulled out a separate folder, this one burgundy, instead of the black ones he'd been reading from. "Your late wife maintained separate assets that you weren't aware of. There's a codicil to her personal will that requires reading at this time." Everyone's attention sharpened. Dad frowned. "What separate assets? We shared everything." "Apparently not everything." Mr. Peaton opened the folder with careful precision. "May I have everyone's attention for the reading of Mrs. Patricia Harrison's personal will and testament?" Victoria's smirk had faded. James actually put his phone down. Dad looked like he'd been slapped. The lawyer adjusted his reading glasses. "I, Patricia N. Harrison, being of sound mind and body, do hereby bequeath my personal estate to my beloved daughter. This includes all accounts held solely in my name, all properties purchased through my inheritance from my late parents, and all investments made independently during my marriage." "That's impossible," Dad interrupted. "Patricia didn't have any separate money." Mr. Peaton's expression remained neutral. "With respect, Mr. Harrison, she did. When Mrs. Harrison's parents passed away 18 years ago, she inherited their entire estate. She chose not to commingle those assets with your marital property. Her parents left her their home in Rhode Island, which she sold for $2.3 million. She invested that money along with a cash inheritance of approximately $4 million very wisely." The silence in the room was deafening. Rain continued its steady drumming against the windows. How much Victoria's voice had lost its confident edge. The lawyer looked directly at me for the first time. Mrs. Harrison's separate assets, including real estate holdings, stock portfolios, and various investment accounts, total approximately $23 million. They transfer entirely to her daughter, along with all personal effects, jewelry, and a safety deposit box at First National Bank. My brain couldn't process what I was hearing. $23 million. Mom had been secretly wealthy and never said a word. Dad shot to his feet. This is absurd. Those assets were marital property. I'm entitled to half at minimum. Actually, you're not. Mr. Peaton remained infuriatingly calm. Connecticut law is quite clear on this matter. Assets inherited during marriage remain separate property unless explicitly combined. Mrs. Harrison kept meticulous records showing the complete separation of her inherited wealth from marital assets. Everything was documented by her personal attorney, Miss Catherine Brennan, who sends her regards and is available should you wish to contest. You bet I'm going to contest, Dad snarled. This is fraud. It's not fraud, it's estate planning. Mrs. Harrison was very deliberate about her wishes. She left you quite comfortable, Mr. Harrison. The house alone is worth $1.22 million, plus the other assets I've already outlined. Your children are also well provided for, but her personal fortune goes to her daughter, as was always her intention. James found his voice. Dad raised her for 40 years. She owes him something. Mr. Peaton's expression hardened slightly. Mrs. Harrison would perhaps disagree, given certain facts that came to light near the end of her life regarding how her daughter was treated throughout her childhood and adulthood. What facts, I managed to ask. The lawyer looked at me with something approaching sympathy. Mrs. Harrison requested that I share this information only if your paternity was called into question during this meeting. Mr. Harrison, you claimed earlier that your wife had an affair that resulted in this young woman's birth. Is that correct? Dad's face had gone red. Yes, obviously. Then you should know that Mrs. Harrison underwent extensive medical testing 6 months ago when she began estate planning. As part of that process, she requested genetic confirmation regarding her daughter's parentage. He pulled out another document. The results conclusively proved that you, Mr. Harrison, are her biological father. There was no affair, no other man. You are genetically speaking her father. The room exploded. Victoria started yelling about the legitimacy of the test. James accused the lawyer of fabrication. Dad stood frozen, his mouth working but no sound emerging. I couldn't move, couldn't think. He'd lied. All those years of coldness, of making me feel less than of treating me like I didn't belong. He'd lied. Why? The word came out as barely a whisper, but everyone heard it. Mr. Peaton answered, because Dad seemed incapable. According to notes your mother left with Ms. Brennan, your father began telling that story when you were approximately 8 years old. She never understood why. She suspected it was because you resembled her family rather than his, and he wanted to justify his preference for his other children. Victoria collapsed back into her chair. This can't be happening. It's happening, I said, finding my voice. You spent years making me feel like I didn't deserve to be part of this family. You told me I was nothing. Product of an affair. Shameful secret. Dad finally met my eyes. What I saw there wasn't remorse or guilt. It was rage. You turned her against me. All that time you spent together poisoning her mind. I didn't turn her against anyone. I loved her. I was the one who took care of her when she got sick. Where were all of you? Victoria was in the Bahamas. James was at some music festival. You were at your office. I was the one holding her hand in the hospital. Because you knew about the money, James said viciously. You were circling like a vulture. I didn't know about any money. Mom never mentioned it once. We talked about books and gardening and her parents, but she never said anything about investments or inheritance. Mr. Peaton closed his folders. Mrs. Harrison was very clear in her instructions. She watched how her family treated her daughter for many years. She documented incidents, saved messages, kept records. Her decision was not made lightly or quickly. It was a result of decades of observation. Dad slammed his hand on the table. I want every document. I want proof. This will not stand. You're welcome to pursue legal action. Miss Brennan anticipated that possibility. I should mention that contesting the will triggers a specific clause that Mrs. Harrison included. Should anyone challenge her daughter's inheritance, a detailed accounting of family dynamics over the past 23 years will become part of the public record. This includes recorded phone conversations, saved text messages, and diary entries documenting treatment that Mrs. Harrison found increasingly disturbing. Victoria paused. What kind of recordings? The kind that would be very embarrassing if made public. Mrs. Harrison was thorough. She began documenting approximately 5 years ago when she realized how severe the situation had become. I believe the phrase insurance policy was used. She kept detailed contemporaneous notes of conversations, saved text messages and emails, and maintained a journal with specific dates and incidents. My mother had been protecting me. Even when I didn't know I needed protection, she'd been building a case, creating safeguards. The woman who'd seemed so gentle and unassuming had been playing chess while everyone else played checkers. "So we just accept this," James demanded. $30 million just disappears. $23 million, Mr. Peberin corrected. And it doesn't disappear. It goes to Mrs. Harrison's daughter as she intended. You each have received substantial inheritances, perhaps not what you expected, but certainly enough to live comfortably. Dad's voice was ice. "Get out of my house." I stood slowly, my legs unsteady. Gladly. "Mr. Peaton, when can we schedule a follow-up meeting? I'll have my assistant call you next week. There are additional materials your mother left for you. Private letters, documents, photographs. She wanted you to understand everything." Walking out of that conference room felt like shedding a skin I'd worn too long. The hallway seemed brighter, despite the gray weather. Behind me, I could hear Victoria arguing with their lawyer, Dad's voice raised in futile anger, James demanding explanations nobody could provide. My phone buzzed, a text from my best friend Natalie. How did it go? I stared at the message for a long moment before typing back. Better than expected. Much better. The drive home through the rain gave me time to think. Mom had known. She figured out that Dad was lying about my paternity, and instead of confronting him publicly, she'd quietly run a DNA test. Then she'd spent years protecting an inheritance I never knew existed. I remembered being 30, crying in her arms after Dad forgot my birthday again. She'd held me and said, "Some people don't know how to love properly. That's their failure, not yours." At 35, when Victoria had deliberately excluded me from family photos at her wedding, Mom had taken me to dinner. "You are worth more than their small cruelties," she'd whispered. Never forget that. After I graduated law school at 40, Dad had refused to attend the ceremony. Mom had been front row center, cheering louder than anyone. "You did this yourself," she'd said afterward. "Nobody can take that away from you." She'd been preparing me, teaching me that my worth wasn't dependent on their acceptance, all while quietly building a future I couldn't have imagined. The rain had stopped by the time I reached my apartment building. I sat in the parking lot for 20 minutes, engine off, just processing everything. My phone kept buzzing with calls from numbers I recognized but had never saved. Dad had my number from years of minimal contact. Apparently he'd shared it with Victoria and James. I'd never bothered saving their numbers because they rarely called unless they needed something. Inside my studio apartment, the contrast between my life and theirs had never been more stark. I'd been living here for 6 years, saving money from my job at a small law firm downtown. The furniture was secondhand, the kitchen barely functional. Meanwhile, Victoria lived in a penthouse Dad had helped her buy, and James had a townhouse in the city funded entirely by family money. I made tea and sat by the window watching traffic move through puddles on the street below. 23 million. The number kept circling through my mind. Surreal and impossible. What did someone even do with that kind of money? My phone rang again. This time it was my best friend Natalie. I answered. "Please tell me you're okay," she said immediately. "I've been texting you for hours." "I'm okay. Better than okay, actually." "What happened? Your text was so cryptic." I told her everything. The cruel declaration from Dad, the smug satisfaction on Victoria and James's faces, the stunning revelation from Mr. Peaton. Natalie listened without interrupting, which was one of the things I loved most about her. "Holy," she breathed when I finished. "Your mom was playing four-dimensional chess while they were playing checkers." That's exactly what I thought. So what now? Are they going to fight it? Probably. Dad looked ready to burn the whole building down. But Mr. Peaton seemed confident. He said Mom documented everything. Had it all reviewed by multiple lawyers. She knew what she was doing. Natalie was quiet for a moment. "You know what this means, right?" "What?" "You never have to see them again. You never have to sit through another holiday where they treat you like hired help. You never have to smile through Victoria's condescending comments or pretend James isn't a complete waste of space. You're 44 years old. You've earned the right to walk away." The freedom in that statement hit me like a wave. She was right. For 44 years, I'd been trying to earn their acceptance constantly, hoping that if I just worked harder, achieved more, proved myself worthy, they'd finally treat me like family. Now I understood that nothing I did would ever be enough because they'd never wanted it to be enough. "I need to find a better lawyer," I said. "Mr. Peaton is good and handles estates. But if Dad can test this, I'll need someone who specializes in litigation. My cousin works at a big firm in Hartford. Thompson and Associates. They handle high-stakes estate disputes. Want me to get you a contact? Yes, thank you. We talked for another hour about practical matters, bank accounts, investments. What did you do first? Natalie worked in finance and had a practical mind for these things. She promised to send me information about financial advisors and accountants who specialized in sudden wealth management. After we hung up, I opened my laptop and started researching articles about inheritance disputes, Connecticut estate law asset protection strategies. The more I read, the more I understood how carefully Mom had planned. Separate accounts meant Dad had no claim. Inherited assets that were never commingled stayed separate property. She followed every rule perfectly. Around midnight, my phone buzzed with a text from a number I didn't have saved. We need to talk. This isn't over. B. Victoria. I deleted the message without responding. Another text came through 5 minutes later. Dad's lawyers are already working on this. You won't get away with manipulating Mom. We all know what you did. I blocked the number. James tried calling from 3 different phones before I finally turned my phone off completely. Sleep came in fits and starts. My dreams filled with courtrooms and angry faces, and Mom's gentle voice telling me everything would be all right. The next morning, I called in sick to work. My boss, a kind woman named Margaret, who ran a small immigration law practice, told me to take whatever time I needed. She'd met Mom once at a firm holiday party and remembered her warmth. Natalie's cousin, David Thompson, agreed to meet me that afternoon. His office occupied an entire floor of a gleaming downtown building. The receptionist led me to a conference room with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city. David was younger than I expected for someone handling such high-stakes cases, maybe 45, with an easy confidence that came from winning difficult battles. He listened while I explained the situation, taking notes on a yellow legal pad. Your mother was extremely thorough, he said when I finished. From what you're describing, she did everything right. Separate accounts, clear documentation, multiple legal reviews. That's excellent. But Dad will fight it anyway. Of course he will. Men like your father don't accept being outmaneuvered, especially by their wives. He'll claim undue influence, question her mental state, argue that you manipulated a dying woman. Standard playbook. She wasn't dying. The aneurysm came out of nowhere. Even better for our case. No terminal illness means no argument about diminished capacity or deathbed decisions made under duress. When did she update her will? I don't know exactly. Mr. Peaton said she'd been planning for about 5 years. David made another note. So well before any health issues. That's strong. And you said there's documentation, recordings, messages. That's what Mr. Peaton implied. Mom apparently kept records of how they treated me. Smart woman. That kind of evidence can be powerful not just legally, but as leverage. Your father won't want those details becoming public record. Neither will your half-siblings. We spent 2 hours going through everything. David explained the legal process, timeline expectations, potential strategies Dad's lawyers might use. He also talked about asset protection, making sure the inheritance was properly shielded regardless of the litigation outcome. I'll be honest with you, David said as we wrapped up. Cases like this can get ugly. Family members say terrible things under oath. Old wounds get reopened. Are you prepared for that? They've been saying terrible things to me my whole life. At least now I'll have the resources to fight back properly. He smiled. Good. That's the attitude you'll need. I'll draw up a representation agreement and reach out to Mr. Peaton to coordinate. In the meantime, don't communicate with your father or half-siblings directly. Everything goes through lawyers from now on. Leaving his office, I felt more grounded. Having a plan helped. So did knowing someone competent was in my corner. Over the next few days, I started making other changes. I gave notice at my apartment explaining to the landlord that I'd be moving within 60 days. I opened new bank accounts at a different institution somewhere Dad and his family had no connections. I changed my phone number and only gave the new one to people I trusted. The boxes from Mr. Peaton's office arrived via courier. 6 cardboard boxes, each carefully labeled. I spent an entire weekend going through them, reading Mom's letters, examining financial statements, looking at photographs I'd never seen before. One box contained nothing but documentation, printed emails where Victoria mocked me to her friends, text message screenshots where James complained about having to acknowledge me at family events, detailed notes Mom had taken immediately after phone conversations, carefully dated and timed, documenting Dad's cruel comments word for word. Mom had saved everything, organized it chronologically, even added her own handwritten notes about context and dates. The cruelty was systematic and intentional. They hadn't just been indifferent or neglectful. They'd actively worked to make me feel unwelcome, to diminish my presence, to ensure I knew my place in the family hierarchy. Another box held Mom's personal journals. I wasn't sure I should read them, but she left them for me deliberately. Her entry started when I was 21 years old, right around the time I graduated college, and Dad had apparently intensified his campaign of exclusion. Patricia's journal, September 8th, 2002. She started her first real job today, 21 years old. So proud, so determined. He didn't even acknowledge it. Didn't ask about her day. Didn't congratulate her. Nothing. Victoria got a new car for her 18th birthday. James got a trip to Europe for graduating high school. Our daughter gets silence. I'm starting to see a pattern I can no longer ignore. October 22nd, 2002. I confronted him today about the favoritism. Do you know what he said? He claimed she's not really his daughter. That I had an affair 21 years ago. It's the most ridiculous thing I've ever heard. She has his eyes, his stubborn streak, his analytical mind. But Victoria planted this seed years ago, and he's let it grow because it justifies his behavior. I told him to stop this nonsense immediately. He refused, said he had doubts, needed to be sure. After 21 years of raising her, suddenly, he has doubts. I'm not sure our marriage can survive this. November 15th, 2002. I scheduled the DNA test through Dr. Matthews. He's keeping it completely confidential. I already know what it will show, but I need the documentation. If my husband is going to poison our daughter's life with lies, I need proof of the truth. Not that truth seems to matter to him anymore. December 8th, 2002. The results came back. She's his daughter. 99.97% certainty. I showed him the paperwork. Do you know what he said? This doesn't change anything. He actually said that because it was never really about paternity. It was about Victoria and James feeling threatened by her accomplishments. It was about him being too weak to stand up to them. So he created a lie that made his favoritism feel justified. I can't look at him the same way. The entries continued year after year, documenting every slight, every instance of exclusion, every time Dad chose his other children over me. Mom had watched it all, recorded it all, and slowly built her plan. April 15th, 2020. She graduated law school today, 40 years old and top of her class. My brilliant girl who worked full-time while studying, who never asked anyone for help, who earned every single achievement herself. Her father didn't come to the ceremony. He claimed a work emergency. There was no emergency. James called him from a bar asking for money, and he chose to wire a transfer instead of supporting his daughter on one of the most important days of her life. I'm done pretending this marriage is anything but a shell. I'm done hoping he'll change. My parents left me comfortable. It's time to make sure my daughter will be more than comfortable. She'll be free. Reading those words, tears streaming down my face, I understood the depth of Mom's love and the scope of her planning. She'd known exactly what she was doing every step of the way. The final journal entry was dated 3 weeks before her death. November 28th, 2024. Everything is in place. Catherine reviewed the documents again. 23 million. All protected, all documented, all separate. The codicil is filed. The contemporaneous notes are cataloged. The text messages and emails are archived. The evidence is overwhelming. If he tries to fight this, if he tries to take away what I built for her, the truth will come out. Every cruel word, every deliberate slight, every instance of him choosing his other children while lying about why. I wish I could be there to see her face when she finds out. My brave girl who never stopped trying to earn love from people who didn't deserve her. She won't need their approval anymore. She'll have security, freedom, and proof that at least one parent valued her exactly as she deserved. My apartment felt too small, suddenly too cramped. $23 million meant I could buy a house or travel or finally start the nonprofit I'd always dreamed about. The possibilities were overwhelming, and I'd already given my notice at work, ready to move forward with this new chapter. Mr. Piton called 3 days later. Can you come by my office? Your mother left several items in our custody. His office was in downtown Hartford, occupying the top floor of a building with views of the river. The receptionist led me to a conference room where cardboard boxes lined one wall. This is everything, Mr. Piton explained. Letters she wrote over the years, financial documents, personal mementos. She also left this for you to read first. He handed me a cream envelope with my name written in Mom's distinctive handwriting. I waited until I was alone to open it. My dearest daughter, if you're reading this, I'm gone. I'm so sorry I couldn't tell you everything in person. I was afraid your father would find out about the money and make our lives even harder. He's not a bad man fundamentally, but he's weak and petty. He let Victoria and James poison his mind against you because it was easier than standing up to them. When you were 21, fresh out of college, Victoria told him you didn't look like his side of the family. She planted the seed of doubt because even then she was jealous of your intelligence and determination. Your father, instead of dismissing such a ridiculous claim, latched onto it. I think part of him wanted an excuse to favor his other children without feeling guilty. I knew he was wrong immediately. You have his stubbornness, his analytical mind, even his terrible habit of organizing books by color, but I got the test anyway through my personal physician. Dr. Matthews kept it completely confidential. The results confirmed what I already knew. You are his daughter in every genetic sense. I never told him the truth because I realized something important. He didn't deserve the truth. He'd made his choice, and that choice revealed his character. I couldn't change who he was, but I could protect you from the consequences. My parents left me everything when they died. 18 years ago. Dad was an investor who did very well, and Mom inherited her family's textile business. They left me comfortable, and I made a comfort into security. I worked with Catherine Brennan to ensure every dollar stayed separate from the marital assets. Your father never asked where the money from selling my parents' house went. He assumed I'd spend it on charity or something feminine and frivolous. His dismissiveness was my advantage. Over 18 years, I turned $6.3 million into $23 million. I studied, learned, took risks that paid off. Every investment was made with you in mind. Every decision calculated to give you freedom. You deserved a father who loved you unconditionally. You deserved siblings who welcomed you. You deserve so much more than what they gave you. I couldn't change the past, but I could change your future. Use this money wisely. Travel. Build something meaningful. Help others. Don't let the rejection define you. You are brilliant, kind, and stronger than you know. You are my greatest achievement, and loving you has been my greatest joy. Your father may contest this will. He may make things difficult. Stand firm. Catherine has everything documented. The truth is on your side. I love you beyond measure. I'm sorry I couldn't stay longer. Make me proud. Mom. I read the letter 3 times before the tears finally came. She'd known everything, protected, everything planned, everything. While Dad was telling me I wasn't really his daughter, Mom was building an empire to prove I was always hers. The legal battle lasted 6 months. Dad hired an expensive attorney who filed motion after motion. They claimed undue influence, questioned Mom's mental state, demanded forensic accounting. Catherine Brennan destroyed every argument with methodical precision. The DNA test was ironclad. The financial records were impeccable. Mom's estate planning had been reviewed by multiple independent attorneys who all confirmed her competence and clear intentions. The judge eventually dismissed the case with prejudice, meaning Dad couldn't refile. In his written opinion, he noted that Mrs. Harrison had clearly been of sound mind, that her separate property was properly maintained, and that her wishes should be respected. Dad tried to call me afterward. I didn't answer. Victoria sent emails that ranged from apologetic to accusatory. I blocked her address. James showed up at my apartment once claiming he just wanted to talk. I told him through the closed door that we had nothing to discuss. The safety deposit box contained jewelry stock certificates and more letters. Mom had written me notes for specific occasions. My wedding day, the birth of my first child, my 40th birthday. She planned for a future she wouldn't see. I bought a house in Rhode Island near where Mom's parents had lived. It needed work, but it had good bones and overlooked the ocean. I hired contractors, chose paint colors, planted a garden. Every decision felt like building something new, something mine. The nonprofit launched 8 months after Mom's death. We focused on legal aid for women, particularly in divorce and estate planning situations. I wanted other women to have the tools Mom had used to protect herself and me. Catherine Brennan joined the board and helped recruit other attorneys willing to donate their time. On the 1-year anniversary of Mom's death, I visited her grave alone. The headstone was simple gray marble with her name and dates. I'd added an inscription, "Beloved Mother Wise, Protector Quiet Warrior." I hope I'm making you proud, I said aloud, feeling only slightly foolish. The nonprofit is doing well. We've helped 43 women so far. The house is almost finished. I'm thinking about going back to school for a graduate degree in nonprofit management. The wind rustled through nearby trees carrying the scent of autumn leaves. I brought flowers, chrysanthemums in shades of rust and gold that Mom had always loved. Dad tried to call again last week. I still don't answer. Victoria sent a card on my birthday. I threw it away. I know you'd probably tell me that forgiveness is for my own peace, not theirs. Maybe someday. Not yet. A cardinal landed on a nearby branch, brilliant red against the gray sky. Mom had always said cardinals were good luck. Thank you, I said finally, for everything. For loving me when they didn't. For protecting me when I didn't know I needed it. For believing I was worth fighting for. I stayed until the sun began setting, talking to her about everything and nothing. About the house renovations, the difficult client at the nonprofit, the man I've been dating, who made me laugh, all the ordinary details of a life she'd made possible. Walking back to my car, I passed another funeral in progress. Family members clustered around a fresh grave, their grief raw and visible. I recognized that pain, remembered the gut-wrenching finality of watching Mom's casket lowered into the ground. But I also knew something they might not have learned yet. Sometimes the people who love us best leave us gifts beyond money or property. They leave us truth, dignity, and the knowledge that we mattered. Mom had given me all three wrapped in an inheritance that had nothing to do with dollar amounts and everything to do with validation. My phone rang as I reached the parking lot. Catherine Brennan's name appeared on the screen. Hope I'm not interrupting anything, she said when I answered. Just visiting Mom. Good timing. I wanted to let you know the final tax documents are processed. Everything's transferred. All accounts in your name. Your mother's estate is officially settled. Thank you, Catherine, for everything. She was remarkable. I've been practicing estate law for 25 years, and I've never seen someone plan so meticulously. She thought of everything. After we hung up, I sat in my car watching leaves blow across the cemetery paths. Mom had thought of everything because she'd had years to watch how Dad and my half-siblings treated me. She'd cataloged every slight, documented every cruelty, and responded not with confrontation but with strategy. The revenge, if you could call it that, wasn't in the money itself. It was in the reversal of expectations. Dad had spent decades telling me I wasn't really part of the family, that I didn't deserve the same consideration as his biological children. He'd been so confident in his narrative that he'd never questioned whether Mom might have her own plans. Victoria and James had smugly assumed their positions as favored children meant they'd inherit everything that mattered. They'd never considered that Mom might value kindness over blood relations, might reward the daughter who'd actually cared about her rather than the ones who showed up only when convenient. The final irony was that Dad had been technically correct all along. I wasn't his daughter in the ways that actually mattered. Genetics didn't make a father. Love did. Presence did. Choosing your child every single day did. He failed at all of it while clinging to a lie that made his failures feel justified. Mom had understood that. She'd known that proving my paternity wouldn't change Dad's heart. So instead, she'd given me something better. Independence from his opinion, financial security, and undeniable proof that at least one parent had loved me exactly as I deserved. I drove home as darkness fell the ocean, barely visible through the trees. Tomorrow I had meetings for the nonprofit calls to return a house that still needed attention. But tonight, I'd pour a glass of the expensive wine Catherine had sent as a congratulations gift, sit on my back porch, and watch the stars emerge. Mom used to say that revenge was a dish best served cold. I'd argued that forgiveness was nobler, more enlightened. Now I understood she'd been talking about something else entirely. Not revenge in the petty sense, but justice, restoration of balance, recognition of worth that had been systematically denied. She'd served it perfectly cold, wrapped in estate documents and trust funds, and she'd served it with love, ensuring her daughter would never again question her value or her place in someone else's narrative. The house lights were warm and welcoming as I pulled into the driveway. My house, my future, my life built on foundations Mom had carefully constructed, while everyone else was busy telling me I didn't belong. I belonged to myself now, and somehow that felt like the greatest inheritance of all.